Ladies, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this planning meeting at East Cambs District Council. We haven't got too many people in the public gallery today, but welcome, and we hope you find the meeting instructive. First of all, we've got a fire safety drill from Tracy.
If the fire alarm sounds, can you please make your way out of the building through the nearest available exit? And that's down the main stairs here and the fire exit here. Please do not use the lifts. And this building does have an auto call out system to the fire service, so you don't need to call them.
And we now move to item 2, which is apologies and substitution. Item 1, I beg your pardon, apologies and substitutions.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from councillors Wilson, Austin and Downey.
Thank you very much. And now item 2, declarations of interest. Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Thank you. Item number 6, the application in Littleport. I note that the Littleport Society, of which I'm a member, have put in a note of opposition to it. However, as a member of the Littleport Society, my views weren't canvassed, so I remain open and an open mind. Thank you.
So you intend to take part in any debate and also vote because you aren't predetermined. Thank you very much indeed. Any other declarations of interest? No. We've now got the minutes, which I hope everybody's read, held on the 7th of September. Has anybody got any reasons why I should not later on sign those as being a true record? No. Okay, Chairman's announcements. I would just like to bring it to members' attention, and I hope the wider audience, that there is a special planning committee meeting is to be held to consider East Cambridgeshire District Council's official response to Sonica, and that meeting is taking place on Thursday the 3rd of November at the Mandeville Hall, Burwell, starting at 10:30. And should people want to speak at that meeting, they should register by contacting Democratic Services before 10 AM on Wednesday the 2nd of November. I would stress that this meeting, this Sonica meeting, we are acting as a consultee and are not in a decision making. We're not going to make a decision, we're going to have East Cambs recommendations. So there won't be a decision made there, it'll just be our views. So I hope that's clear. And I have asked for item number 5. Members should have in front of them some figures which I asked officers to prepare, and they are indicating the amount of burials and cremations that have taken, all the numbers that are relevant between 1970 and 2020. So people can see what the situation is in that activity. Moving then on to item number 5, we are now at the stage for officer recommendation report.
Sorry, I thought we had a technical difficulty, but it seems to have been resolved now. Good afternoon, members. Good afternoon, members of the public. Can everybody hear me? Okay, this is.
Could you speak a little bit closer to the microphone?
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to twist and turn as well. So I'm just sort of do say if you can't hear me if I turn that way.
Okay. Yes, I realise that.
Okay, so we've got agenda item 5, which is the construction of a crematorium and associated service and administration buildings, function building, memorial garden, natural burial areas, pet cemetery, car parking, new vehicular access from the A142 north of the site, and landscaping. And the site is Meeple Outdoor Centre, Chatteris Road, Meeple, Ely. The applicant is East Cambridgeshire District Council. This is the application site outlined in red. As you can see, the site area comprises mostly of a lake with buildings in the centre here and land just to the southeast of the site. The site area comprises approximately 13 hectares, which is 32 acres in old money, located on the western side of the A412 between Meeple and Chatteris, and approximately 12 kilometres, that's 7.45 miles, to the west of Ely, and forms part of the Meeple Pits County Wildlife Site. Here we have an aerial view, so you can see now to the north of the site is the Pretoria Energy site, and then just to the east of that is the Blockmore Drove. The site was in open countryside until the 1950s, when it was in use as a quarry for aggregates. By the late 1970s, the quarry was filled with water and the site became an outdoor educational facility. Dense hedgerow and trees screen the site and all of its 4 boundaries. There is a public right of way. Can you see the cursor? Is it going along there? Yeah. Okay. There's following the line of the cursor. It's a public right of way that sort of meets at the end of the site and goes its way from there. So here are the site and the surroundings. So this is the site prior to the demolition of the activity centre buildings, and you can see that there's a lot of graffiti going on the right-hand side here. There was some arson attacks, so that's been severely damaged. But all these buildings have now been removed. But it does give you an indication of what the site suffered with prior to their demolition. Here we have beautiful views of the lake and the foreshore. And then here is to the north of the site looking south. So you've got the not palisade fencing, but sort of security fencing here, looking across the lake. And on the slide on the right hand side is the public right of way, which I've just indicated to you. Okay, so the proposal is the crematorium, which constitutes a main chapel, the crematorium hall, and associated service and administration buildings, a flower court and memorial garden, a function building, a natural burial area, pet cemetery, and car parking for up to 123 cars, and a secondary access point to the north of the cell. Just to give you a little bit more of information, background information, burials and interment figures have been based on 20 burials each year over the 15-year period as follows. So there would be 294 natural burials, 290 in-ground ash interments, and 120 pet burials, and provision for ash scattering. So that's the projected amount that could be undertaken in that 15-year period. The applicants have been working with the Wildlife Trust to ensure protected species and habitats are not compromised by the proposed development. So I've got a master plan here. On the left-hand side is the existing layout, and then on the right-hand side is the proposed layout. I've done it as a skew a bit because ultimately that gives you the same orientation as the existing layout. So I hope that makes it clear. Okay, so again, by background information, the applicant undertook an alternative site assessment based on the call for site submission in 2016, and the Fenland Sheila, which was undertaken in 2020. The search criteria have been based on minimum requirements regarding the area of the site at 2 hectares or 5 acres. In order to comply with the Cremation Act 1902, any building would need to be more than 200 yards or 183 meters from a dwelling house and 50 yards, 45 meters from a public highway. The location would all need to offer quietness and seclusion and be reasonably accessible by public transport with access to adequate water, electricity and drainage services. None of the sites identified within the ASA or the Sheila could provide a location suitable for the intended use as a crematorium. Therefore, it is likely that such uses would only come forward on larger open sites on the periphery of settlements. In terms of the comments that this site is in the wrong location, it is questionable as evidence from the ASA where a more appropriate location would be. Given the particular site selection and locational requirements, it is considered to be most unlikely that suitable land could be found within the defined settlement boundary, and therefore it can reasonably be concluded that a rural location outside of a defined settlement boundary being the most appropriate location for the development of a crematorium. So as you can see by the two comparisons, so the existing site and the proposed layout, they do mimic a similar footprint to the existing site. So everything has been planned or laid out specifically so that the existing footprint of the hard surfacing is taken into consideration with the proposed layout. There will be no through access to the north of the site from the crematorium, as a separate northern access point from the A142 will be provided, and this will have a limited parking area, but I'll go into that further on in the slide presentation. Okay, so this is the layout. This is sort of drilled down further into the site, and it's a layout of the crematorium. So on the right-hand side, I don't think you can see it very well, but I'm going to try and take you through via a series of arrows. On the left-hand side, you can see it provides a breakdown of the various buildings and areas. So the visitors to the crematorium would come in through the entrance here, and then they would arrive through the porte cochere, which is this way through here. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then it will go under there where it would deposit visitors into the main chapel entrance. And then it would ferry again through here and out through to a parking areas which are there. From there, they would enter the main chapel, which is here. Also, I should point out that this building here is sort of a waiting area so that people can wait for their relatives and friends so that they can all go in together. So again, you'd go into the main chapel area where there's seating. There's a view of the lake and the landscaped areas straight in front of you. There's visuals in a moment, so you'll be able to see. And then when the service is finished, they go out, they're conveyed out on the left-hand side through to an elevated platform and through to the flower court and beyond. The areas here are all administrative buildings, and then the main crematorium hall is there. Okay, so this is just sort of a breakdown of the vehicular and pedestrian access. The red arrow is the route from the A142 taking you into the site. The blue line is the funeral party vehicle route going through there and out through that way. And then the brown line indicates the service vehicles, so they wouldn't be sort of conveyed the same way. They would just go straight into the administrative areas and the crematorium hall. The yellow area, or the yellow line, is the principal pedestrian route. So as you see, it comes out of the main crematorium hall and through the flower court and in this area, which is the Gardens of Remembrance. Likewise, this, if you're coming from the car park here, you'd go through into the main chapel that way. So here are some visuals of how the entrance would look like. Just take you through these quickly. So this is how you would, here again is the waiting area. This is the, excuse me, this is the entrance to the main chapel. And then you've got the crematorium hall here on the right-hand side. Again, and this is how it looked like from the rear. Oh, rear elevation again. Side elevation. This bit is the entrance to the flower court, which is quite unique. And that's how the flower court would look. And a function building, which is accessed by car, or you can walk there. And there's a pontoon that you can look out over the lake. So this is a concept image of how the site could look like. So you're coming in through the A142 here into the parking area. You'd be conveyed through the porte cochere here, through into the main entrance. You can see here the flower court, the memorial gardens, and then you've got the function building with the pontoon out over the lake. Here you have the areas where the natural burials and ash interments would be. There's some more visuals. So this is the inside of the chapel, what it would look like with views out, looking out over the lake, and then again from the lake looking the other way. So the material planning considerations are the principle of development, residential amenity, visual amenity, historic environment, access, highway safety, parking, ecology, and other matters. So taking you into the principle of development, it is acknowledged that there is continued public support to retain as an outdoor activity centre. However, the applicant has submitted a record of the demise of the activity centre, which starts with financial difficulties of operating a facility on this site and the marketing exercise which has been undertaken to source a suitable provider. The applicant on 2 occasions invited organisations to register their interest in the site so that it could continue to provide outdoor recreational facilities for visitors. A potential provider was found to retain the site in its existing use. However, in 2019, it was reported to the Finance and Assets Committee of the Council that the preferred bidder had decided not to progress with their bid. Clearly, the site is an isolated location and therefore cannot easily be accessible to the whole community. Moreover, due to its remote location, the site attracted antisocial behaviour. After repeated attempts to find a suitable provider who could continue to run the site in its previous use, the applicant had to review its strategy and contend that the existing use of the site was no longer viable. The new use is also classified as a community use on land to the south of the site, and it makes efficient use of land. The majority of the site to the north can continue to support passive outdoor recreational uses. There is a long-standing ambition to provide a crematorium in East Cambs to support future levels of growth. An alternative site assessment was undertaken, and the implications of the Cremation Act 1902 on sightings of crematoriums influence location of development, and no other sites were found suitable. Land is also classified as previously developed land. So there is no detriment to residential amenity, and visually attractive buildings would be more in keeping with the visual amenities and character of the area. The increase in traffic, but operation times would operate outside of the rush hour. In terms of historic environment, sustainability, flooding, drainage and ground contamination have all been found acceptable. Therefore, the principle of the proposal is considered to meet with both national and local planning policy and is considered acceptable. So, and then just to sort of go over everything, in terms of residential amenity, this slide actually indicates, so we have a settlement of houses now down here to the south of the site, and Block Fen Drove goes along here. However, all these residents are outside of the 200 yards or 183 meters or 600 foot exclusion zone, which has been set out by the Cremation Act. There have been no letters of representation received regarding impact on residential amenity. A noise impact assessment and emission statement have been submitted, and the environmental health officers agreed with the findings. However, they have requested a revised noise impact assessment is provided, detailing information of the proposed plants and attenuation methods. And that's requested by condition. The air quality assessment has been submitted. The height of the chimney stack would be 7 meters, which is 23 foot. Again, the environmental health officers have agreed with the findings that emissions to the atmosphere would not be of concern to human health. So there's no adverse impact on residential amenity, and a range of mitigation measures are being imposed by condition. In terms of visual amenity, you have various slides This is the top left-hand side is the orientation is northwest, taken from a distance of 2.4 meters. To the right, the orientation is also northwest, about 2.5 kilometers. The red arrow stipulates where the site would be seen from. Bottom left, again, distance 2.7 meters. And the bottom right is 3.1 kilometers distance from North Vendrove. Sorry, can you see the top one is the view from Bridge Road in Meeple. The second slide on the right-hand side is the view from St Mary's Church in Meeple. And the third one is the view from the Brange Hill Lane in Meeple. And the fourth one is the long North Vendrove. Sorry.
Sorry, Chairman, through you. You kept saying meters. I think you probably meant to say kilometres, did you? The distance. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor.
The countryside in this part of the district is classified as the Fens National Character Area, which are characterised as large, open, flat and low-lying fields under wide skies crossed by numerous waterways and drainage channels. Uninterrupted landscapes provide long views of the buildings and settlements. However, its previous quarrying history, derelict buildings, arson, vandalism and antisocial behaviour, trespass anxiety, lack of landscape management in terms of safety issues and lack of ecological management have devalued the site's contribution to the wider landscape setting. Right. So you've got here now a slide of greyed out. It is the proposed dwellings, and to the right of them you've got the height of the existing building. So you can see that the height of this the existing activity centre was over 18 meters in height. So this is taken at the ground level here, and the maximum height of the proposed building along here would be 8.5 meters. So it is a complete reduction, it's a reduction in the height of the proposed. So here we have an artist's impression from the A142 of what the site would look like once it's been built out and landscaped. So historic environment, due to the previous extensive quarrying activity undertaken in the 20th century, the destruction of archaeological features and deposits within the quarried area will already have taken place, and therefore the County Council archaeologist has no objections to the development. So in terms of access and highway safety, this is the aerial shot of the site here on the left-hand side as you're going along the Ireton Way. See if I've got anything more to say to you there. Yeah, I have. There are no footpaths on either side of the A142, and access to the north and south of the site would be obtained from the existing entrances, which are gained directly from the A142. A road safety audit stage 1 has been carried out, and a number of issues were flagged up, namely that to avoid the risk of collisions, a no right turn order should be introduced at the location of the main entrance. A TRO would need to be applied for. It has also been recommended that 215 metres or 820 feet visibility displays are provided at the main entrance, and these would be retained clear of encroachment by vegetation. It was also advised that a road safety audit stage 2 be carried out should planning permission be granted. In terms of trip generation, Meeple site would typically host 4 to 5 cremations per day, with a total of 204 two-way trip generation. The local highways authority have not objected, subject to the restrictions of services to be undertaken within off-peak periods. And as all visitors would most likely be known to each other and travelling together, they would also therefore car share. So here's a breakdown of the primary access for the cremation. As you can see, this is it. This is an exploded view now. So you can see here that the entrance into the site would be, have to be a number of modification or alignments there, resulting in the introduction of a splitter island here on the bell mouth here. So that would, anyone exiting the site would not be able to turn right. That doesn't mean that people coming from from the north of the site, they can still turn right into it, but anyone leaving the site would have to turn left, go up to the roundabout by the Pretoria Energy, and then come back on themselves and go the other way. And likewise, if you're going that other way, yeah, vice versa. Visitors travelling to the crematorium would drive directly to the car park, where funeral parties would use the same entrance but would be dropped off at the porte cochere, which is just here. And would be picked up from the same location. So there would be no access to the north of the site from the south. Also, as part of the RSA stage 1 and to promote safe operation of the junction, it has been recommended that 850 foot visibility space are provided at the main entrance, and these would be retained clear of encroachment by vegetation. So now we go to the secondary access, and that's to the top of the site, to the north of the site here, and that's the exploded view here. Again, it would just be left in and left out again. And here you've got 5 parking spaces and 1 disabled parking space. Although it's somewhat overgrown at the moment, there is evidence that there is an entrance and egress to the north part of the site, and therefore visibility space would be introduced and vegetation clearance maintained. And this would be resolved as part of the off-site highway works under a Section 278 agreement. Okay, car parking, electric and car charging strategy. So that's just a photo of the existing car park area, and on the right hand side you've got a total of 104 standard bays, 20 disabled parking spaces for both visitors and staff, 5 bays for hearses, 3 minibus bays would be provided, and there would also be 22 electric charging points at strategic locations covering main disabled staff and parking areas. The blue dots, can you make out the blue dots? Yeah, jolly good. Indicate freestanding electric car charging points, and they're 20 in number. And the blue diamonds, I can't actually see them because my glasses aren't so good, will indicate the wall-mounted electric charging points. Okay, turning to ecology and biodiversity. The site is located within 2 kilometres of the Ouse Washes, special area of conservation, a Ramsar, SSSI and SPA. It also forms part of the Meeple Gravel Pits County Wildlife Site. A number of ecological surveys have been undertaken, and an ecological impact assessment has been submitted and assessed by the Wildlife Trust and Natural England, who have reviewed the application and have raised no objections subject to appropriate mitigation being secured. The findings have revealed that a total of 276 plant species and subspecies have been recorded in areas within the lake body, around the lake margin and within the open sandy areas. 32 bird species were recorded using the site, 3 of which are on the red list. Otters and water vole were confirmed on the bankside and in and around the lake. The most important habitats are located south of the main buildings within the old car parking areas, the sand areas and the sand mounds. This open mosaic habitat has become one of the most highly valued on the site. Due to the unique set of circumstances and the increased biodiversity value of the site, should the area be reinstated as an outdoor activity centre, then planning permission would not be required, and this oasis of species-rich habitat would suffer as a consequence. Within the scheme as submitted, the site can continue in community use, and a range of recommended mitigation measures, precautionary measures and compensation measures will ensure the biodiversity and ecological value of the site can be maintained. These measures would form part of the conditions of the site, which is the LEMP. So can everyone see that slide on the left-hand side? Yeah, can you make out that the very light green, light blue? Yeah, good. Okay, so
I can't read the writing
no, I'm going
on
to.
the
I'm going to
right
take
of
you.
the slide.
I've got it all here, so I'm going to take you through them now. So the red area here, okay, this is the compensation area, where I'm just going to abbreviate the open mosaic habitats because that kind of tongue ties you sometimes. Okay, so this is the compensation area where a new OMH habitat will be created by scraping away existing rich grass and topsoil, to reveal the aggregate substrate beneath onto which a new OMH will be encouraged to develop. As evidenced by existing mosaic habitats, see the blue section below, it is expected that the new OMH would develop over a period of approximately 4 years. This has been the process of the established area, which has developed since 2017, when the outdoor centre closed. Consequently, in decades ahead, by the time the green zone is released for burials, the compensation area will have been long established and equally, if not more valuable. So going to the blue area, this relates to the eastern section of the OMH, which has developed naturally over the previous gravel car park. The eastern section has less valuable habitat development than the western section and has therefore been identified as the first area to be released for natural burials, estimated to be between 20 and 30 per annum. It is important to emphasise that when burial plots have been used, the top surface of ground will be heavily aggregated soil reserved from the grave excavation. The aim is to recreate the OMH habitat, which would then be left untouched for decades or more to come. Oh, sorry, yeah. So that's can you see the blue area here that we're talking about? Yeah. Moving on to the green area, which is just down here. So the western area of the OMH has become more established and is therefore more ecologically valuable. As detailed in red above, when this area is finally needed for natural burials in the future, the compensation area will have established as will the early burial areas within the reinstated OMH. So, sorry, but I just had to sort of get that clear so that you understand what is going on within these areas and the habitat mitigation and compensation that's going to carry on. Okay, so getting into other matters now. The scheme proposes a recovery system as part of climate change and sustainability. The scheme proposes a recovery system as part of the heating and hot water strategy, as well as the installation of rooftop solar panels on the crematorium buildings, as well as an on-site battery storage to facilitate the proposal to meet 70% or up to 70% of its electricity needs through new renewables. In terms of flood risk and drainage, the site lies within flood zone 3, where a sequential test is required. A sequential test has been submitted and it has not identified a suitable site for the proposed development, and therefore there are no reasonably available sites that would accommodate the proposed development within flood zones 1 or 2. The sequential test has therefore been passed. The SUDs propose use of cellular storage crates or attenuated discharge into the lake. The site layout would be designed with the evacuation procedures in mind, and as there has no been objection from the EA, the IDB or the LLFA, the flooding and drainage is considered to be acceptable. With regard to contaminated land, a consistent groundwater table exists across the site at depths of approximately 2.8 metres to 3.5 metres below ground level. A total of 7 trial pits were dug across the proposed burial area, and groundwater was only found in 1 trial pit at a depth of 2 metres below ground level. The report submitted with the application recommends that burials are restricted to a single depth burial, which would provide the required 1 metre unsaturated zone beneath the base of the burial. The assessment concludes that the site would be classed as being a moderate risk for less than 20 burials per annum, and consideration should be given to undertaking pollutant flux modelling to assess the impacts burials would have on the water quality of adjacent surface water measures and underlying groundwater. The EA do not consider the scheme would present a high priority to land contamination, though. The public consultation in regard to community engagement, the public consultation undertaken revealed that members of the public had a fond sentiment for the Meeple Outdoor Centre. However, it is also acknowledged that respondents supported the protection of biodiversity and ecology on the site and were not opposed to the idea of a crematorium on the site. So, recommendation. Whilst it is acknowledged that the centre was well used and there has been overwhelming support for its retention, no service provider has been found to continue that use. Whilst the site has not been in use, it has suffered from arson attacks and antisocial behaviour. However, the biodiversity and ecology interests have thrived, and should the previous use be reinstated across the site, then the protected species and natural habitats may be detrimentally affected as a consequence. The proposal will retain land for the continuation of passive leisure and recreational purposes, with an area of the site to the south proposed for a new crematorium and associated service and administration buildings. The community use of the site has therefore been retained. The scheme would be sufficiently distant from any residential properties as required by the Cremation Act, and therefore no material harm to residential amenity. In terms of design and use of materials is concerned, the crematorium and associated buildings are of a high quality of design, and the palette of materials proposed would blend in with the surrounding area. Architecturally, the scheme is visually attractive, and the bulk scale and massing of the proposal is far less visually intrusive than the previous buildings and would not be visible from long distance views. As such, it is more in keeping with the character of the area than the previous buildings. The scheme would generate additional traffic. However, the local highways authority have raised no objections, subject to a condition restricting the operation of the site outside of peak hours. As set out in the council's corporate plan 2017-2019, there has been a long-standing ambition to provide a crematorium and natural burial ground within the district. The site is suitable for the proposed uses, and there are no effects which account significantly against the proposal or which outweigh the community and economic benefits of the development. The application is therefore recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That must have taken you a long time to prepare. And I think you've covered a lot of the issues, if not all of them. We now have a speaker, an objector, Pretoria Lee. If you'd like to come up to the speaking desk, you have 5 minutes, and the amber light will go on at 4, and you should press the microphone. Yes, okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all. I'm Pretoria Lee, representing PJ Lee & Sons and Pretoria Energy Company. We border the site on 3 sides, of which our occupations consist of arable farming, green energy production, and quarrying aggregates. Even though today we are registered as objectors, we are in fact not opposed to this application. We are only concerned neighbours who would like to reiterate what we believe are factors for consideration. On the north side of the application, we have Pretoria Energy. Through our own application conditions, we had to implement a proportion of sound attenuating fence lines to shield that of the old outdoor centre. We propose a condition is needed for this application to construct their own soundproof boundary, either through bunding and landscaping or fencing, to help that of the noise for the traffic on the roundabout, as well as the fact we're currently building an extension to the AD plant, which will have increased traffic movements itself. As a company with the access rights for this roundabout, we would happily allow ECDC to utilise this in respect of implementing any sound attenuation. We were in fact surprised that the applicant has not been in contact with the supplying of green energy for their development, considering we supply a large proportion to the county's needs. On the other side of the application, we have the PJ Lee and Mick George Hall Road. This is a main access to a fenland estate, of which has 365-day-a-year movements by both laden and unladen tractors and lorries. To try and alleviate traffic movements through local villages such as Sutton and Chatteris, it's a privately maintained rubble track that undoubtedly becomes an agricultural highway in the appropriate harvest months. Albeit we have tankers for dust suppression and sweepers for mud deposits that are regularly used, inevitably, in our opinion, it's not a background noise that would be appreciated by mourners at any point. We would therefore also propose a solution here of sound attenuation from the current boundary fencing. On the western boundary, we have 5 to 10 vehicles a day trespassing across our Hall Road to park and currently illegally fish at this location. It has become a weekly clear up of rubbish and fly tipping, which is hard to maintain and control. We are hoping with the designated areas proposed for parking, this will hopefully clean up the area and also reduce the vandalism accounts at our premises gateways, both PJ Lee and Pretoria Energy. The security of this western boundary should be strongly considered due to the public taking liabilities of this access. Liberties. I understand that some of my comments cannot be regarded as material considerations, but I do hope with the committee members' support and the officers' assistance, a successful outcome could be achieved for all. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, if you could just sit there while I ask if members have got questions. Members. Councillor Jones.
Sorry, I was just trying to, you were talking about the site and soundproofing, you were suggesting needing between your property, the energy production and that one. I'm aware how noisy, we are talking about the track that leads between the lake and your property, is that the one we're talking about?
Yes,
Just
so
for clarity,
yes, so the access off the roundabout, we implemented the fencing along that top corner.
the wooden fencing. that-
Yes,
that's
correct,
right.
yes.
Okay.
So we didn't know whether it was considered to continue that to the north and to the south due to the applications with the mourners, etc., with the different services.
Okay, thanks for taking consideration. I'm wondering how noisy that would be necessarily. The other thing was you talked about information. You said antisocial behaviour or vandalism or something like that. You said it's on your property. We did see some rubbish there this morning. Is that the type of
Yes.
thing you're talking about, or is there? anything else?
Yes. So we get vandalism of our electric gates, which are one end on the Hall Road, which is to the southern boundary. So people try and hit the gate, drive through it, to then get to the back of the site to then illegally fish. So they park on our drove and then knock down the fence and go in, leaving. We've had cars left, we've had litter, all manner of objects. So we've found it a concern for the security.
If I may, just for clarity on that, because I'm a little unaware, I don't know if the officer can put on plan. We're not talking about the gates into your energy plant. but
No,
other
the
gates-
other end, the southern
end,
boundary,
right,
yes,
right down. Okay,
yes.
yes, now I think I know.
So at the moment,
We
it's
didn't
sort
get
of a
that far
broken.
down and
Okay, so there's broken wired fencing, which is where members of the public have decided to take their own liberty to go in to fish. And they use our access. And if we do lock the gates, which we do in the evenings, then we've had quite a lot of vandalism from that.
thank you, Chair.
Councillor Trout.
Thank you. Couple of questions. You said there was going to be increased traffic. I may have missed how much you think it will be increasing by your traffic. You're saying
Yes, through the extension of the AD plant, obviously over the next year, as we're construction, there's going to be increased traffic movements, etc. from
what
lorries.
can you quantify that? 10%?
I can't
20%?
quantify that, sadly, sorry.
And will that be farm traffic as?
It will be farm traffic, but it will be mainly construction traffic, bringing in concrete, etc. for the construction of the AD.
Yeah,
plant.
but once the plant is going,
Yes, there will then be increased agricultural movements as well in harvest periods to fill the areas, fill the clamps, shall we call them?
and the other one is, do any of your employees come in by bus there?
No, they don't.
No.
No.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else got any questions? No, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now we've got Oliver Bell, who's the applicant's agent. It's the same for you, Mr. Bell, it's fine. It's 5 minutes and the amber light will go on at 4. Please start at your own convenience.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks. I'm a director at Nexus Planning. I act as an agent for this planning application on behalf of the council as the applicant. The officer's report and the presentation you've heard is comprehensive, covers all relevant technical matters and outlines how the proposals accord with local and national planning policy. A position I agree with. So I don't propose to cover all of those matters. I just propose to cover on key points that have arisen through the preparation and consideration of the application and the important benefits that the scheme will deliver. So from the comments received during the application process, it's clear that there is a strong affection for the former Meeple Outdoor Centre, and clearly this is understandable, given it was a well-used facility for decades. However, as you have heard, those circumstances have now changed. The facility first closed some 10 years ago amid financial difficulties, and again in 2017, in part due to theft and arson. The council then made extensive efforts to re-let the site for alternative recreational uses without success. A single potential bidder was found to retain the site in its existing use, but in 2019, the bidder decided not to progress. It's therefore reasonable to conclude that such a use is no longer viable in this location. And I would add that in my experience, a typical planning test associated with loss of protected uses tends to involve a marketing exercise, perhaps for in the region of 1 to 2 years. So therefore, to my mind, the council has gone above and beyond in this regard. Turning to need, you'll be aware that there is no crematorium in East Cambridgeshire, and therefore residents rely upon private or publicly managed facilities outside of the district. In this context, the council's corporate plan identifies a long-standing ambition to provide a crematorium and natural burial ground in the district. Subsequent to that, a full council approved an outline business case for the proposed development in July 2020. And overall, the view was taken that these proposals would provide better access for local residents for crematorium and burial services, importantly at affordable prices. Now, while some of the community consultation has identified opposition to the proposals, I think it's fair to say that much of this is linked to the perceived associated loss of the Meeple Outdoor Centre. And in any event, 3/4 did consider that they would use alternative crematorium facilities or burial facilities if they became available in a closer location. There was also support from local funeral directors. Reference has been made to the approach to other crematorium applications, but as members will appreciate, each application must be assessed on its merits. I think the pertinent point here of need is that this application site comprises brownfield land. It replaces an historic community use with a new community use. And such proposals comply with and are clearly supported by the council's adopted local plan. Conversely, in my experience of dealing with other crematory applications, they're often located on greenfield sites and conflict with local policies, and therefore must be justified by clear benefits that outweigh those policy conflicts and harms, with need being a key case to identify and address that benefit. So turning to the benefits of this scheme, these are extensive, but I wanted to outline a few points to draw to your attention. The first one is delivering multi-purpose facility, including a crematorium, natural burial provision, pet cemetery and memorial gardens, providing a new resource for the community on brownfield land. It includes a high quality design approach, which would improve the character of the area relative to the previous buildings that existed on site. Sustainability is at the core of the development. There'll be an electric cremator, which releases approximately 90% less carbon than a conventional gas cremator. Electric charging points will be provided. There's a heat recovery system, solar panel provision and on-site battery storage, such that the scheme can meet 70% of its electricity needs through renewables, and it will also achieve a BREEAM Very Good standard. Other benefits include providing a clear framework to preserve and enhance the biodiversity value of the site, and as you've heard, there will be continued public recreational access to the wider lake. Overall, the proposals would deliver a holistic bereavement service to the local community through high quality, attractive and sustainable buildings. The proposals comply with local and national planning policy and in line with the office's recommendation. I politely urge members to approve the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. I've already got questions down here, and if you'd go ahead. Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
You've got councillor.
One
Yeah.
point I just queried, really, I say queried, but perhaps it's not an interest. You talked about this as electric crematorium. I noticed there's no stack or flue that's visible on the drawings. I mean, is there any one that we don't see, or is there? I mean, there must be some sort of waste gas. I take it from the disposal.
Yeah, there is some, but it's I suppose it's a move away from the traditional gas cremators, which had to have a higher flue to enable greater sort of air dispersion, etc. So the flue is actually pretty much the same sort of height as a building. So you don't get a kind of I suppose what you might have in your mind as a traditional view of a crematorium that would have a chapel building with a large stack. So that's the reason.
So, Chairman, just on that point, just for clarity, because we've got various drawings of the building, could somebody point out on one of those? Could somebody point out on one of the drawings of the actual building where the flue is? Is that it on the? Go back one. Is that it in the centre?
Yes, unfortunately, we don't have the annotations listed, but I believe that is the location.
Are you content with that? And so we now move on to Councillor Every.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back and just look at the history again, because the indications is that it was actually quite thriving, this facility, up until 2017 when it was closed. But from my experience and understanding, it had been run by a trust and they had been unable to make it work successfully. And at that time, suggested that the East Cambs took it back again because it was no longer viable. I just wanted to just clarify that that is the case, because there is this feeling that it was absolutely viable up until a certain point and then that stopped, but that isn't actually what had happened. And this is pretty much in line with what other outdoor pursuit activities within Cambridgeshire have experienced being unable to be viable for this kind of outdoor activity. I know it's not really a question.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult one for me, unfortunately, as you appreciate, probably in terms of my involvement on this as the planning consultant on this project. I wasn't involved in obviously the previous history, so much of the kind of the background marketing information is obviously being provided by representatives of the council as far as their marketing expertise. But the bottom line is that obviously there has been a checkered history of it in terms of its challenges of viability, and that obviously there's been a range of efforts to try and ensure that that can continue, but that's unfortunately proved unsuccessful.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate about the unsuccessfulness of it. So that then moved into the possibility of private sector taking over such an activity. And from information that we received, they didn't feel that that was a viable opportunity either. So we had gone from a trust to looking at it from perhaps East Cambs running it to a private developer running it. And none of those appeared to be to show any kind of successful business plan for such an activity.
Yes, I think the short answer to that is yes. Yeah, the marketing exercise covered all variety of potential occupiers.
Councillor Every, for clarification, I think I'm in a good position to answer your question. I was the chair of an outdoor centre working party which met in July 17, October 17, December 17 and March 18. That working party consisted of myself, Councillor Stubbs and Councillor Dupre, so it was at the time cross-party. We explored all the possibilities of a commercial answer to this. We did have an applicant who later withdrew and offered us terms which would have been extreme financial burden on this authority. And up until that time, we had been renting the site out for one peppercorn per year, and various operators had returned the keys and were unable. There'd been a change in the needs and uses of such facilities throughout the country, and there was no commercial answer to this. And as I say, this was a decision that was made cross-party because the working party included Councillor Dupre.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, I've got you down on my list, but I think you've already had that. So Councillor Trapp.
Had you considered something like water cremation or alkaline hydrolysis, which is far more environmentally friendly than any kind of cremation, and would be actually quite an asset rather than having the same old story?
Good, interesting question. I think simple answer, I think I have to say you're pushing my expertise in terms of my as not an expert in terms of the variety of options in terms of cremation. I think clearly a range of options have been considered, and as you've heard, there's been a particular focus in terms of looking at the ways to look at most sustainable, practical solutions. I mean, the reality is that electric cremators have actually only really come online within a relatively recent number of years, to be honest. It's been gas cremators for some time, so that's actually quite a big step change in the industry. So I think that actually is quite a big and important step that this scheme will be delivering.
Well, I'm surprised you haven't actually considered that, because environmentally it's much friendlier. The other point is, large building like that, have you thought of putting solar panels on it?
Yes, we have, and that's what we will be doing.
You will. Okay.
Correct, and there will be, so for use of battery storage as well, there'll be about 70% of the overall energy demand of the facility will be provided through renewables, i.e. through solar panels.
And ground source heating?
No, that's not been considered as an option. Solar panels has been considered as the most viable option, but there is a condition which will require the further details of the sustainability strategy.
Because thermal, certainly ground source is also very effective, much more effective than sometimes.
It is, but obviously the challenges of that, as well as the extensive excavation that might be necessary to achieve it. And obviously we've got quite tight constraints in terms of from an ecological perspective in that regard.
Underneath the car park.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Second
I may have another
question.
point, so Chair, thank you.
Second question to the Speaker.
Thank you, Chair. So one of the previous from Victoria mentioned about the noise abatement that might be necessary. Has any investigation been done into the assessment of traffic noise from harvest vehicles?
There has been a noise assessment that's been undertaken, and obviously as part of the kind of in regard to the requirements of the Cremation Act, etc., in terms of tranquility, etc. That it doesn't mean it has to be a location which is completely devoid of any noise and activity. You get some crematorium that are located in closer to larger settlements, etc. So that has been considered. I think overall that the view has been taken, and that's been validated through the technical work, is that the actual facility itself is quite isolated. There's quite an extensive distance between that and the other noise areas, noise generators. So i.e. between the lake is between those. So it's obviously there will be an element of a noise of general activity. There'll be some road noise, etc. There'll be some agricultural vehicles. It's in a rural location, but ultimately it's deemed to be an appropriate or not an adverse level of noise that would be experienced by users.
So when the noise assessment was done, was that looking at transport from the back road, or was that just looking from the main road, from the transport? Do you know?
I honest answer is I don't know off the top of my head, but obviously when a noise assessment's undertaken, there'll be a range of locations in which noise monitoring will be undertaken. I don't have that in front of me, so I don't want to kind of guess and say something wrong.
I don't know what the wagging of finger means. Does it mean?
Can I do one more?
Does it? One more.
Thank you, Chair. So just addressing the concerns of the other, again, previous occupant. I don't know if it's within your remit if you're only looking at the site itself, but obviously they talked about vandalism and things like that coming down from that. Is it under your? Is it part of your concern about fencing down there, so illegal fishing and things like that, or are you only looking at the site? Is that something you can comment on?
Well, I would hope that if this development is approved, it would improve the current issues that exist on the site insofar as obviously the vandalism, etc., that's taken place at the old outdoor centre, and then also the illegal fishing that's taken place. You saw in the presentation that there's going to be some actual formalised car parking that will be provided. That doesn't exist at the moment. So hopefully that will actually provide a clear and lawful place for individuals to be able to park and utilise the lake difficult for me to comment on and control what others may choose to do in terms of illegal fishing, etc. There's limitations in terms of what we can we can achieve. But I would hope that it would at least make some improvement on the current situation.
Thank you very much. I think that's it. And if you'd like to resume your seat, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We now have a statement. I can't quite make out whether it's a statement from both Councillor Dupre and Councillor Inskip, or whether it's two separate statements.
Yes,
But whatever it is you're reading aloud.
yes, it is a joint statement from councillors Inskip and Dupre as the local ward councillors for the Sutton ward. So I've been asked to read this out. And they've given various headings. Introduction. The Meeple Outdoor Centre was, for more than 3 decades, a well-used and valued community outdoor leisure facility. If this application for a crematorium and associated elements is approved, then the potential for meaningful outdoor leisure use will be lost at the site. The few leisure opportunities suggested are very much ancillary to the main purpose reflected in the provision of just 6 parking spaces. Then on the issue of leisure use, whilst previous attempts to find an operator for the site to continue outdoor leisure facilities was not successful, alternative operating models have not been extensively explored, which may have been more viable. Take my glasses off, I'll read better. The District Council had also not considered any new investment as could have been provided by allocating just a small proportion of the community infrastructure levy receipts it holds for developments in the surrounding area. It should also be noted that post-COVID, there is an increased focus on outdoor leisure facilities. The District Council has therefore not adequately demonstrated that there is no longer a need for the existing use of the site as an outdoor leisure facility. And community views. The community view of the proposal has been well established by the applicant's own survey as reported in the Statement of Community Involvement, paragraph 3.4.2.8. Additional comments summarises the results, reporting that just 13% of respondents supported the proposals, with 85.4% opposed to them. The primary reasons for the opposition to the proposals were: 1, the site should be retained as an outdoor leisure centre. 2, there is not seen to be a need for another crematorium to be built. 3, the site is not seen as the right location for the development. It is odd to justify the development as a community resource when the overwhelming views expressed by the community are that the existing community leisure use for the site should be retained, when the community do not see the need for the new facility, and when the community do not consider this an appropriate location. Then we come on to need. The applicant does not provide a robust case to justify the need for a new crematorium in this part of the district. There is already significant nearby provision in the well-established Fenland crematorium in March, along with the recently opened crematorium in Huntingdon. The catchment area identified by the applicant for potential crematorium locations is centred on Ely rather than East Cambridgeshire district. This results in significant overlap on the western side with areas served by Fenland and Huntingdonshire's crematoria. This is particularly true for the Meeple Outdoor Centre location. The planning application for the Huntingdon crematorium included a comprehensive needs assessment, which was considered as part of the planning approval process. No similar needs assessment has been provided for this application, and yet establishing a robust case for the need for the new crematorium at this location is essential given the corresponding lots of outdoor leisure. The survey of funeral directors undertaken by the applicant elicited just 11 responses, with 8 suggesting that they would consider using alternative facilities in the area if they became available. Transport. Transport implications, and particularly road safety issues, are of significant concern for this location. The applicant acknowledges that there will be significant increase in traffic movements from the site compared to the existing approved use. The proposed cemetery and crematorium development will provide 123 parking spaces. There are an additional 28 parking spaces near the cemetery area. The crematorium chapel will accommodate up to 125 people. There are no pedestrian or safe cycling routes to the site, and the only public transport provision, a 2-hourly bus service, is due to be withdrawn at the end of the month. The transport assessment assumes that there'll be 15 vehicles associated with each cremation service, with 5 services per day, together with 27 other vehicles. This would be 102 vehicle arrivals and 204 two-way trips. The proposed Huntingdon crematorium is a similarly sized facility. However, the transport assessment concluded that a figure of 23 vehicles would be more appropriate per cremation service, together with 56 other vehicle movements. Given the assessment and justification in the Huntingdon transport assessment leading to a 50% higher figure, it would appear that the transport assessment for this application significantly understates the likely number of vehicle movements. To add further context, even with a generous vehicle occupancy of 3 people per vehicle, that would result in just 45 people by service on average, or around 36% occupancy for 125 people capacity chapel. In the transport assessment data, if the transport assessment data were aligned with the Huntingdon crematorium data and combined with the increased vehicle movements for the recent expansion of the neighbouring anaerobic digester plant, then the currently proposed higher mitigations are likely to be inadequate and raise serious safety concerns. In conclusion, and in summary, the applicant has failed to establish adequate justification to redevelop the site, and in so doing to lose an opportunity to restore a previous well-loved community facility and replace it with a commercial crematorium. 2, there are significant traffic and transport issues on a stretch of road with a poor safety record. Traffic movements are likely to increase with the expansion of the neighbouring anaerobic digester plant and will be further exacerbated by the opening of the crematorium. Suitable active travel options are not available and public transport is being withdrawn.
Thank you. It's a pity Councillor Dupre and Councillor Inscrip aren't here to answer questions, and it's a shame they weren't. I would just like to make comments, therefore, that could be considered in response to that. And I'll be more precise now. On the 31st of July in 2017, and on the 6th of October 2017, and on the 18th of December 2017, and also on the 12th of March 2018, the working party that I stressed that I was chairing was attended by and was party to Councillor Dupre, and therefore I'm confused that she claims that we hadn't, as a council, gone into the finances behind the existing leisure centre. She was very much part of the interview process of applicants, very much part of the whole business of determining that it wasn't of commercial future. So she knows that. I'm rather surprised she's got confused. And there's another thing which I find slightly confusing, and which I would have asked had she been here, is that if there is no demand for this crematorium, then clearly it wouldn't increase the traffic. And if and a lot of her comments, or hers or Councillor Instrip's comments, are talking about increased traffic. Well, if there weren't a demand, there wouldn't be an increase in traffic. So she seems to be wanting to make 2 points there, and I find one is in conflict with the other. So thank you to Councillor Dupre and Councillor Instrip, but they have just increased my confusion. We now move on, and we will go to extra points from the officer.
Clarification on the boundary treatment. Do we require comments from me regarding the use of attenuation fencing along the southern and the northern boundaries? At the moment, on the slide here, you can—
Do you speak closer to the microphone, please?
At the moment, you can see here, this line here is the southern boundary of the site, and you can see the haul route. You can just make out like a vehicle here using it. At the moment, it's proposed to put up security fencing, so that would be over 2 meters in height. Doesn't actually mean attenuation. Now, although you can hear the noise of the Pretoria energy plant from the site, you have to take a view whether or not that would affect visitors' experience of the site. It's in an agricultural area where you have agricultural machinery normally. To put up attenuation, acoustic fencing, as it were, it would need to be probably over about 2.5 meters in height, and it might be unsightly. So you have to make a balancing exercise as to whether or not this is something that the applicant can do at a later stage after planning permission has been granted. It's not something that has to be, it's a decider now for the application. It can be changed at a later date. I don't feel that it's a deal breaker one way or the other, whether or not there's attenuation on that southern boundary. With regard to the northern boundary, again, it's a matter for the council to decide whether they want to restrict access to the northern boundary by members of the public. And that's something that the members would need to discuss and form a view of. We can add conditions on if you wish. At the moment, there are no conditions that restrict or that impose a boundary treatment to the northern area of the site. With regard to the letter from, or the statement from councillors Inskip and Dupre, this is exactly the same letter that was submitted as a letter of representation when the application was being considered. So therefore, I consider that I have dealt with all of those issues within my report to committee. However, if members feel that I need to highlight anything further, I'm quite happy to do so. But I consider I have.
That's okay. And on that point, I think you've covered it. But are there any other points you'd like to stress?
No, I think I've covered it, everything, every angle. Obviously, members are quite at the liberty to ask me any questions, and I'll do the best of my ability to answer.
We're going to come to the questions to the officer in a minute. Okay, members, questions to the officer. Well, could you make several short ones then?
Well, I think the application was of something important.
I would agree with you, and that's why I said you could have, and that's why I said you could have several.
Sorry, I've been demonstrated for not switching off my microphone now because I have not switched on my microphone. Thank you for your presentation. There is actually one material concern raised by councillors Dupre and Inskip, which is about buses. At the moment, there's not going to be any bus after the 31st of October. So the public access criteria fails. Yes, there's a bus at the moment, and I've just plotted the route from Soham, which I thought is about the center of the district. And sometimes it takes an hour and a quarter, an hour and a half, 2 hours. And there's only 5 buses a day to do that. I'm not sure about the return journey. So the public access is not very good, certainly at the moment, and certainly non-existent after the 31st of October. So that I think that fails that criteria. The other one I had is you mentioned that the majority of the land use can continue as before as a passive outdoor recreational. Are you including the water surface here? Because if so, I don't think the majority of the land will be. If you look at the map that you've shown us before, it's from the boundaries. It is actually probably about a third, a quarter of the thing. So I think that, and apparently there's not going to be any sailing or canoeing or any other water sports on the lake either. Is that right?
Do you want me to answer individually? I was going to do it all in one go otherwise, but
Answer individually. please.
Okay, okay, to take the first one first, yes. Yes, as I've mentioned in my report, that there was a bus service. However, there's no path, footpath either side. However, that's going to be the same, that's an existing situation. And that would be the same with any community use that was operating from that site. So even if it went down to an outdoor activity centre or any other recreational activity, that would be the same. And yes, in the planning balance, it is a material planning consideration, but it's not the only one. And as you know, that everything has to be balanced evenly. And in that particular instance, the fact that we're considering a pre-existing condition that any use would have that same problem. Okay, so the next one.
Could I just clarify something there? First of all, the transport and the buses situation in Cambridgeshire is a matter for the combined authority, which is a matter for the mayor and not this authority. And also, you will be aware that Stagecoach have now announced a closure of the route that goes from Chatteris to Ely, which is the route concerned. But of course, that is a matter that is beyond the control of this authority, and it is a matter for the mayor and the combined authority to resolve. The mayor has promised, of course, that he will improve the bus services, and so we look to see how the expanded bus services happen. Can you continue then, Councillor Trapp?
I'm still sort of working through your list. So I haven't really finished on the first, sorry. Yeah, with regard to the proposed use, it's more likely that that visitors to the crematorium will be known to each other and then more likely to car share. And that's the same principle cannot be true of another community use where members of the public would be going individually. So in that respect, it's more likely that people would car share with the proposed use of the site, the proposed community use of the site. Coming to your second point, you were quite right. I did, when I was saying land, I would mean, it used to be a gravel pit. So, you know, ultimately, if you were thinking about it 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it would have been land. So I do apologise for that, my mistake. Yes, so however, okay, so at the moment, only passive recreational uses are proposed, but that's not to say that in the future, the council may consider inviting other recreational activity in the future. So it's not the end of it now. It's not cast in stone, but in future, more water sports may become available. It's at the moment, they're just taking the advice of the Wildlife Trust and restricting the passive recreational uses until another view can be formed as to whether or not they open it up for wider water sports.
That's rather specious. That's sort of rather like the bus thing actually in the future. But I thought, coming back to the bus, you started off by saying one of the criteria was that there should be public access, and there clearly isn't any from the 31st of October.
Correct.
Okay, so that fails that. All right. The other question I had, which I suppose I should have actually asked Mr. Bell, was I've done a brief sort of look at where the people residing in this area, and I reckon that over half, about half, just under half, would actually are better served by Suffolk, West Suffolk crematorium or the King crematorium. Much easier access than along that road. So it will only really benefit the north of the district.
Yes, but that's where most of the growth is being directed, isn't it, to the north of the district? That's where the areas of growth are in the district, or the local plan are going to be in Little Port Soham and Ely. So they would be using this crematorium.
Well, I'm not sure about Soham, but sorry. Gosh, it should be automatic. Tracy, you should do this automatically for me. I mean, that's what you're here for. I'm sorry, I missed the figure about how many possible cremations there might be per day.
Per day, there would be 4 to 5 cremation services per day. And the figures that are presented to us are over a 15-year period.
So
So
4 to 5 per day. So there won't be any overlap between services then.
no, but if there are people that wish to stay longer, as you can see from the drawing here, there are circulatory routes. There's a waiting area. Let me just point you here. There's a waiting room here where people, if they're waiting for that service to finish, and then visitors were going to be directed out to the left-hand side through to the flower court to the Gardens of Remembrance. So there is, there won't be like crowds of people turning up while a service is already. And that's an organisational responsibility, not something that I can sort of quantify at the moment.
Right. So I'm sorry about the questions, but it is a big major development and therefore needs some. Is the floor of the chapel more or less ground level?
It's fully accessible. It's fully ground level from
Ground, because when we viewed we went that little lone tree in the middle there.
the oak.
I'm not sure how much of the lake will be visible over the boundary hedges. So although one has this promise of a lakeside view, it does look like not sure.
It has potential to be clear.
Artist
It is an
impression.
artist impression. However, ultimately, they're not going to just build they are going to do a great deal of landscaping in association with the Wildlife Trust, and there are conditions, and there's a LEMP condition on to ensure that everything is undertaken sympathetically so that there are views. If you can see, I don't know.
I think, judging from what I saw today, if you're ground level in the chapel, you'll see grounds, you'll see levels there. And I think Kevin was also saying that will be, is that right, Dan?
I think if I can just interject, because I was with you in the car today. I think, yes, as it currently stands, the level of bramble that's on that, on the northern side of the peninsula would limit views if the chapel floor were absolutely at current ground level. I think it's likely that it may be elevated slightly as a finished floor level in any case. But as Anne says, there will be a landscaping programme that comes forward as part of kind of dual biodiversity and landscaping, which has the potential to open up those views. So I wouldn't say, no, I would say don't judge it entirely on the basis of what was there this morning.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. And my apologies if it was just me that missed it. We were talking about the no right turn from the cremation site. Could you also say about the smaller parking area that's associated with the leisure use?
This is the one, the passive recreational lay. It's a lay-by. So funnily enough, I think I was speaking to the tree officer and he said that was the existing entrance initially. I didn't know that. So again, you would be coming in on the left-hand turning and parking here parking here. And then there would be a facility to go out again on the left-hand side as well.
So that will be a no right turn as well.
No, you could go right-hand turn into here like that, but you would be leaving left-hand turn.
Yeah, that's what I'm meaning.
Yes,
So
sorry,
there's
sorry.
no
Yes.
right-hand turn heading
Yeah, sorry,
south.
yeah.
Right.
It would be, yes, and in and out, hopefully.
Thanks.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question. Am I correct in thinking that the Wildlife Trust's reports really limited what could be done in any leisure activity, and that you've worked in line, and the current proposal is in line with the recommendations and investigations by the Wildlife Trust you've been working with.
Yes, the Wildlife Trust have been engaged very early on in the design of the proposal. And that does restrict the amount of biodiversity and wildlife present on the site, does restrict what can actually happen on that site now.
Just to clarify that, so the Wildlife Trust's opinions and recommendations have helped you to form your opinion on this matter.
Absolutely, and they will continue to during the lifetime of the application, because there are conditions which will, they will have to respond to and advise accordingly.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't just a sort of, oh, I don't think you should do that. This was a formal consultation you had with the Wildlife Trust. Yeah, okay, thank you. And you've got Councillor Stubbs.
Hi, Anne. Going on from Councillor Hunt's point there. You've mentioned in your report many times about passive recreation. So we heard much about it being a lot of emotion locally about it being a well-liked facility, and now you've talked about passive leisure. So can you just explain why it's now become a facility known for its passive leisure? What's the sort of difference given what was there before? How has it come to be that? What does that actually mean?
Okay, well, in association with the Wildlife Trust, as I've mentioned in my report, there's been a lot of an increase in biodiversity and ecology. You've got the presence of otters and water vole. If you start commencing recreational activities which are not passive, then you can put in jeopardy species which have established over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. I think that what will transpire in the future is that once the passive recreational activities have been allowed on site, then the ecology and biodiversity of the site can be monitored to see whether or not an increase in the use of leisure facilities can be allowed on the site. But at the moment, the Wildlife Trust are stipulating that only passive recreational uses like dog walking on a lead, fishing and bird watching at the moment are the only ones they would advise that are undertaken on that site.
If I may. Thank you. And you were really, really detailed when you were talking about your mosaic habitat, OMH. That blew my mind. So if you don't mind if I ask another question about it, and you talked about scraping surfaces and all sorts of stuff. So can you just explain a little bit more about what that means? What's underneath there in layman's terms?
Underneath, it's a wonderful, rich habitat that has evolved on the areas of the sand and the car parking, and ultimately, if you can scrape it away and then put your interment or your burial there, and then reinstate that habitat. So that's what they're trying to achieve there by degrees, so that not all of that site. Let me just take you to that. Oopsie, here again. As you can see, there's sort of red area. The new habitat would need to be created. So that's at the moment there'd be no burials undertaken in that area until that habitat was actually created there. The blue area at the moment it's actually been created over the gravel car park, and therefore that would be available to be released in sections to start from. So that again, that habitat would be scraped back, the burial would take place, and then the habitat can be restored over the top of it.
Thank you. It still blows my mind. But just one final question, please. A bit more straightforward. I see there's been quite a bit of interaction with both Sutton Parish Council, Meikle Parish Council and Fenland District Council. Am I right from reading the report that they don't have any objection in principle against the development.
That's right. That's my interpretation.
Lovely, thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. If I might just go back to the point that Councillor Hunt brought up. You talked about the wildlife and it becoming a limiting factor. Is there any opportunity in the future if, say, another leisure activity wanted to go, like the outdoor centre again, wanted to return? Is there a ability to offset any biodiversity effects they put it on somewhere else, like we've done on other bits, or is we stuck with what we've got now?
Bearing in mind that this area that we're looking at now is the most important habitat creation of the site, and therefore it's being undertaken in conjunction with the Wildlife Trust. I wouldn't want to personally say that nothing else could go on there apart from this, apart from the crematorium use. However, it would have to be undertaken in association with the Wildlife Trust, just like the applicants have had to do, putting forward their proposal for the crematorium use. So I'm not out, ultimately, unless another application is submitted for an alternative use. Again, the Wildlife Trust would need to be on board and provide advice as to whether an alternative use would be acceptable. But it's if it went back to the original use as a car park, it would have an adverse impact and it would not be supported by the Wildlife Trust. Does that clarify?
Yes. Can I just clarify the weighting that Wildlife Trust has? Do they have an overriding decision on it in terms of?
Well, if you have statutory and
They do
protected
have statutory,
species,
that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, you can't just go and destroy them, basically. Well, you could, but it would probably be a criminal offence. Am I right? So,
Councillor Trapp.
I thought you ought to have me in small measure rather than one big. But doesn't that?
I think there's a difference opinion between small and
But what you just said about the car parking, surely you are creating a large car park there anyway. So.
yeah, that's right. However, it's not only the car park, it's, let me go back to another slide here where we can. Give more of a breakdown. No. Okay, so this slide here. Okay, what we have here is an area, all of this, all to the south of the site, all of this bank here, which would be wonderful to put canoes in and go. However, these areas, as you can see, have been limited from any intrusion by members of the public by virtue of the fact that they hold this open habitat mosaic, all of the area here, and these can be controlled and managed in a way that would not detract from the ecology and biodiversity of the site. So if you were going to have an activity centre where you couldn't actually use the lake, because at the moment you can't with this use because of the otters and the water vole. So again, you're restricting, it's an outdoor activity centre, but you actually can't use the outdoors because of all the protected species. So why not just have it in a gym then? Okay.
The other one, the function building, is that for holding wakes and things? So the afters?
Yes, so I don't know whether I was sufficiently clear. I think I showed you on the site visit. You've got the function building is this slightly grey building here. There's parking here, and people, when they're finished, and of course you can walk to the function building here, and then you've got the pontoon that you can look out on. And there again, you can see that black line. It restricts any people from using the foreshore because of the the protection measures in place. But yes, that's designed for use by the crematorium. So you couldn't have your 18th birthday party there if you wanted.
You couldn't. Is it just for wakes?
It's just for wakes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the other one is, and maybe I should have asked Mr. Bell this. I should have asked Mr. Bell this perhaps. Is will there be changing places toilets here? We've had a big debate in the in district council about this and the provision. A lot of the people coming here might be of similar age to the deceased, and changing places toilets might be appropriate there. I just put it down for your consideration, which I think we should actually consider that very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move on to the debate section, and we're going to hand over. Councillor Brown, I'm sorry, did I catch your? Yeah, that was you'd like to speak in the debate.
Yes, please, Chairman.
Okay, and Councillor Ambrose Smith is second. Right, Councillor. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Chairman. A few things I'd like to say. Firstly, coming back on the comments that Councillor Trapp was making about buses and lack of buses and public access. Okay, as it stands today, there is a bus. As it stands today at the 1st of November, there won't be a bus. Quite where we'll be by the time this is built and open, if we grant it permission, is a totally different question. Because there might well be a bus, there might well be 2 buses. We don't know. On other leisure uses, I suspect the sailing fraternity are desperately waiting for Anglian Water to crack on with their reservoir at Chatteris, because they've already said that that's what they're going to be doing there, those leisure uses. Again, there's all these things in the future. We've got to look at what we've got and the advice we've got from the Wildlife Trust. On the question of noise attenuation and fencing there, again, as it stands today, I'm not convinced of the need for it. I think an awful lot of work has gone into this application. I confess I like it. I like the work that's gone in. I like the attention to detail and some of the road safety aspects. I'm certainly not trying to curtail any debate, but I would be happy enough to propose the officer's recommendation as it stands. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, first of all, I'm noting your comments, but we'll obviously continue the debate. And Councillor Stubbs.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Brown, I recognise how much work has gone into this, Anne, and I thank you for it, how much detail has gone into it. And as Councillor Trapp mentioned many times, this is a very important application that needs very, very careful consideration. So it's really good to see how much information is here and how many people have been engaged with across, like I said earlier, Fenland, Meeple, Sutton, and whilst they had some maybe issues, concerns, things that needed addressing initially, they've all been addressed. Highways are satisfied, but and I know it's just not just you, Anne. There's been lots of officers behind the scenes who've really brought this to us today, including some who sadly not here today. But I'd like to say that I think this will be something that we will be very proud of, because it's as Anne said, it is still a leisure area. It's passive leisure, but it's going to be something that is it's sustainability and ecology, as Mr. Bell said, at its core. We're going to be really proud of this. And you think about some of the crematoriums that are around that people have talked about. I've always found them quite sad. Well, they obviously are a sad occasion, but they add to the occasion, because they're normally quite dreary, miserable buildings that you're not encouraged to actually sort of spend much time together to remember the person who may have passed. And I think this actually area will actually probably help people at the most saddest times. So we've mentioned it's been a corporate objective. So of course, that's something that we've worked for. And as Councillor Hunt stated, I was one of those people on the working party with himself and Councillor Dupre. And for 2 years, we tried really hard to maintain this place as an outdoor activity centre. We had a huge procurement exercise. We tried once and then twice. We spent much time actually interviewing the potential applicants. We were so relieved when we had one that looked like they were going to be the person who's going to take it forward. And we were so disappointed when they actually came to us and asked for money to actually get the place running, which was not the way that we wanted it to actually go, because we wanted to hand it over to somebody who could make a something of it. So we were more disappointed than anybody when they decided they weren't going to pursue it. Then COVID hit. So in some ways, maybe it was a good thing, because who knows what could have happened. But I think this is a fantastic, it's going to be a jewel in the crown for East Cambs, for the fact that it's going to look like an absolutely fantastic place. The amount of biodiversity on this site is just incredible, you know, and Anne's talked about it today. And I think that's something we're all very conscious about, of maintaining. And we were there today. It's a wonderful site. I look forward to seeing it coming forward as a crematorium. And as Councillor Brown said, I'm going to definitely be supporting his proposal to actually approve as it stands the application. So thank you very much.
Is that approval a seconding of his proposal?
Absolutely.
Thank you. We do have a proposal and a seconder, but we're going to continue with the debate. And Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Thank you. Representing Littleport, I do take issue with the supposed proposal that a crematorium is not required in this neck of the woods. Over the years, I've attended services at crematoriums in March, in Cambridge, in Bury St Edmunds and other places, and they are a day's hike to get to from Littleport. The journeys are invariably inconvenient. To get to March from Littleport is soul destroying. One route is across Welney Wash, so that puts you out of the picture for several weeks of the year. So this just, 15 minutes up the road is excellent. Littleport is an expanding community. Ely continues to expand, as does Soham. So I think that there will be no lack of people wishing to use these services. In the past, family members, the service at the crematorium has been delayed simply because there are not enough slots to go round. And that was perhaps going 5-6 years ago. So yeah, this will improve the situation. So I will certainly be supporting this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more members? Yes, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, personally looking at this one, I mean, I can't find any planning reason to turn it down. It does seem to be quite a good scheme in that aspect. Obviously, I've taken on board Councillor Dupree's and Councillor Inskip's comments. And yeah, I perhaps do feel it's a loss that we haven't been able to retain the previous sort of leisure facilities, the outdoor centre. It does seem to be increasingly obvious that it's unlikely to go back to that, mainly through the fact that if you, and from their point of view, they didn't want the increase, or talking about the increase in traffic. If you are going to put something there, then you probably need a lot more traffic there to make it commercially viable. And that seems to be something that would not be taken kindly to any future alternative uses. So with, obviously it'd be a shame to completely rule it out, and obviously there's still opportunity for it. But with that in mind, and the fact that I can't see any other reasons to turn it down, I do feel that I'm probably going to have to support this one.
Thank you very much. Mr. Trapp, Councillor Trapp.
I'm glad you got my title right at last. You always make this little step of that. Thank you very much. Am I to understand that if this is approved, there's still a business case to go before the Finance and Assets Committee? That this is not the
No.
I don't believe so, but I'd take advice.
No, the business case was already discussed and approved in July 2020.
I don't think it was.
That's at the full council.
Yes.
I've got the minutes here somewhere.
Okay, well, I
July 2020.
So a full business case will need to be approved. So the outline business case went to that meeting, but there is still a final.
full business
Planning
case.
permission, and there is still a final business case to be approved.
So the principle of the business case has been. approved.
But it's the outline still has to be done. Okay, fine, thank you. I'm not sure. I think I'm dubious about it because where I live, it will not serve us. It will not serve the south, east or west, anything below CERM really, it will not serve. So I think the central location would be better. And I think the idea of the public access, which is part of the criteria, is not being demonstrated. So I don't think I'll be voting for it.
Thank you. Councillor Evie, I'll defer to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will be supporting this recommendation. I would also like to thank Anne for the work that's been done and also to thank all of those who've been involved in this. This has been a really tortuous, hard process to go through since 2017. So much has changed, so much has moved on, but we are where we are. And I absolutely agree with Councillor Stubbs. I think in the future, we'll look back on this, those of us who are still here or maybe not at Meeple, will be able to look back and say, this was a good plan, well executed, and it will be something that we could be proud of in this area.
Well, you beat me to it. I was going to say something of similar thanks to the officers and the long, hard work that has gone into getting this far. And I'd just like to make one or two comments as well. It's worthy of note, you know, but when we ask and consult with local councils, they don't have a control on what we do in East Cambs, but nevertheless, I think it's professional and admirable that our officers have consulted so many local councils and not had objections. So I think that's an important issue. I think it's also important that highways have no objection. I note that if people are particularly keen on water sports, and Anglian Water have just announced they're going to open a new facility at Chatteris, which is only just down the road. So I wish them luck with that. And my final comment is that we all know that there's more and more houses being built in this area, and East Cambs doesn't have a crematorium at the moment. And I did ask officers to look up figures, and the point of fact is that in 1970, just over half of people who died were cremated. It was 56%, but in 2020, it's risen to 81%. So the trend is upwards. So the population is increasing, and the percentage of those people who are dying are electing, or their relatives are electing, to be cremated. So I think clearly there is a need here, and I will be supporting we have a proposal from Councillor Brown. It's been seconded by Councillor Stubbs, and I intend, unless anybody else has got any more items to debate, to go to the vote. Nope. Okay, in which case, are those in favour of Councillor Brown's proposal to approve it, will they raise their hands?
Okay.
Will those opposed to the no, you've only got one arm that counts, Councillor Trapp. You're only allowed one for this purpose. So that's one. Any abstentions?
No, so the recommendation is carried by 7 votes in favour to 1 vote against.
Okay, so that item is now approved. Yes, I think it might be appropriate to have literally, if we can certainly be all assembled and ready to go by 4 o'clock, we'll have a comfort break. But if everyone is back earlier than that, we'll start when everybody's here. Resume the planning committee meeting, and we'll go to the officers' presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So agenda item 6 for 6 4-bed dwellings and associated works on land north of, I'm going to call it Region in Padnell. Applicant is Bedwell's Developments and I am the case officer. A little bit of housekeeping before we move on. Obviously, we have received a letter from the Littleport Society. This was recirculated to members on Friday. I can't explain, it's a technical hitch, but conditions 15 to 18 appear to have been omitted from the front page of the report, but the detailed conditions are in Appendix 1. The applicant had said it was phased development. I've got confirmation from him that it is not phased development, so it is 6 dwellings in total. And a condition should be added for energy and sustainability statement should be appended as condition 19 to any approval given. So moving on, this is the location plan. Obviously saw this earlier today. So this is the site, and as you can see, we have Hawthorne Close here to the north. We have the Park Home development to the northeast, and to the south we have Fisher Bank with the rest of Padnell in this area here. The site is approximately 0.9 hectares or 2.4 acres. So this is the aerial view of the site, and as you can see, it is surrounded by residential development on all boundaries. So I've just got some photos for you for the site. So this is a view pretty much where we were standing a little earlier today. So this is looking towards Region, and then this is looking towards the Hawthorne Close area. This again is looking further towards Region, and then again to the Hawthorne Close area. So the proposed layout, you can see there are 6 dwellings, and these are in this area here, with this area to the north and coming down here to be used as a habitat area. And this is based on the ecology information submitted with the application. So additional planting would be proposed, as well as protection to existing trees. There's a post and rail fence with access from Padnell, and to the north is the public right-of-way, which we walked along earlier today. So to give you the plot details, all of them are 4 bedrooms. They're all detached. Each has 2 parking spaces that uses a mix of materials. There's a mix of roof heights to give you an interest, and also because the site that abuts it, there are no sort of chimneys or that kind of detail. So the change in roof heights provides that detail. So this is plot 1. This is a 1.5 story. And again, it just has a basic layout of 4 bedrooms with all sort of reception rooms at ground floor. This again is repeated for plot 2, but as you can see, it's got a different design, different materials to just give the site a sort of different look, so it's not all looking the same. Plot 3, this backs on to Hawthorne Close. Plot 4 also backs on to Hawthorne Close. And then plot 5 is a slightly larger dwelling, which backs onto to Region. And the same with plot 6, which is also a 1.5 story dwelling. So in terms of the main considerations, we have principle of development, residential amenity, visual amenity, the historic environment, highways, ecology and trees, along with flood risk. So in terms of principle of development, as we saw on site, the site is within a residential development area in terms of it is surrounded by residential development. However, please note, this is the development envelope. This is the black line here, which is for the development envelope for Littleport. However, obviously in paragraph 7.1 to 7.11, we discussed that the fact that development should be concentrated in Littleport, Ely and Soham, and where they're on the edge of settlements and there is sort of a residential use in its
that it shares a boundary with, there may be times when residential development may be acceptable, but only may be. But obviously in this circumstance, it is surrounded, it's almost like an island surrounded by residential development, and it is on the edge of a market town of Littleport where we do expect to see development. In terms of residential amenity, the minimum in excess of 20 metres from back to back of housing has been maintained, which is 66 feet. Any noise from construction can be dealt with via condition. Each of the plot has a large garden, so in excess of our 50 square metres, but there may be a necessity to restrict windows on some of the elevations, not because there is overlooking, but there's the perception of overlooking, and that's just to maintain the amenities of the adjoining neighbours. In terms of visual amenity, it will provide an enhanced landscaping. It is a spacious development, but it also enables a transition from urban to rural. So you'll get the transition where it's built up, and then you get the transition to going into more of a rural setting. In terms of the historic environment, there is a requirement for archaeology, and a pre-commencement condition is required. In terms of highway safety, it does provide a pedestrian crossing. Each of the properties provides 2 parking spaces, and that will retain the use of the public footpath. In terms of ecology and trees, the development of the site is restricted by the ecology needs, and there is an AMS, which is an arboricultural method statement required for the site. It may be that there is a biodiversity condition on recommended within the report, but it may be that you want to also consider the management of that biodiversity area, and you may want that condition slightly altered. In terms of flood risk, it's in flood zone 1, and this is where we would expect most vulnerable development to be located, as this has a lesser risk of flooding. And on that basis, there is a recommendation for approval subject to a condition for the sustainability and energy statement, and you may wish to consider the biodiversity management condition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We've got a letter here from the Littleport Society and a statement from Catherine Crane, who's a neighbour to the site, and the request is that Tracy Cooper reads those 2, one letter and one statement, if you would.
Thank you, Chairman. These are much shorter. So this is the statement from the Littleport Society. The executive and committee members of the Littleport Society are of one mind in its objection to this application for a number of reasons. 1, the development site lies outside the boundary of the adopted development envelope as defined in the policies map April 2015, and approval of this application would fundamentally breach the guidance of the East Cambridgeshire District Council local plan. 2, the Littleport Society is aware that the National Planning Policy Framework contains an exemption allowing for isolated homes in the countryside that are of exceptional quality or innovative nature. The Society has carefully studied the proposals for this development and is of the opinion that the design comprehensively fails to meet these criteria. 3, objections to the scheme from both neighbours and consultees include fear of overlooking, flooding, disturbance to residents, disturbance to existing wildlife, and inadequate vehicular access to the site, both for construction traffic and potential residents. 4, the Littleport Society maintains its belief that this proposal, rather than creating a windfall housing development, constitutes a major intrusion into the rural space around the village. Taking into account the substantial housing schemes elsewhere in this and neighbouring parishes, the development is considered to be unnecessary and nothing more than an unfortunate destruction of a heritage greenfield asset. The Littleport Society requests that the application be refused in its entirety. So then we move on to the statement by Catherine Crane. I strongly feel this proposed development does not sit right within the area. This paddock has an abundance of wildlife, including bats, water vole, bees, birds, butterflies, dragonflies, muntjacs, foxes, squirrels, bank vole, field mice, shrews, red kites, as well as many established natural trees and hedgerows which provide cover and nutrition for these creatures. I do not feel it is fair to take this away from them for human gain. Not to mention this paddock has various horses on it for more than 10 years, so it's very much in use. The 6 dwellings will overbear all surrounding properties and stand out like sore thumbs. The proposed wildlife habitat mentioned is tiny in comparison to real life. Where will the catch water drain to? The dike has become close to flooding in the past, and with 6 large houses being built, what happens to the water then? The impact to all residents include regarding traffic, a minimum of an extra 12 vehicles will make this peaceful country lane unbearable and unsafe to many ramblers, families and dog walkers every day. Not to mention the junction to Victoria Street, Padnell, being even more congested so close to the railway crossing. Why not try and keep a little countryside within the countryside? With the new development at Highfield, Littleport, and the continued development of 700 dwellings being built along the A10 Littleport, we must surely have enough houses for everyone.
Okay, well, we haven't got anybody else to make any comments or speak to us. So I think this is, would the officer like to make any other comments? That I don't think you've really got much to clarify, have you?
No, I think obviously a lot of these issues have already been raised previously, and do consider that most of these or all of these have been addressed within my report. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, so have members got any questions for the officer? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I was just trying to look up, so have the, you've addressed it in there, but I'm just trying to find it. With reference to the flooding issues, they said, can you direct us to, obviously talking about are they using soakaways? Where's the drain water, surface water going to go?
So it is flood zone 1, so that's where we would expect residential development to be located. And it has been addressed within the report that the foul and water will be connected to the main sewers, and that the surface water will be dealt with by way of polystorm crate system. So it is being dealt with.
Is it a filtrate system? Will it not drain into the ditches and which they are talking about that are currently up to flooding? Not go into the ground. What I'm saying is crate system puts it into the ground underneath, and as I understood it from the letter that Tracy read out, they were talking about the ditches being close to flooding at some points.
As far as I'm aware, there's not been any objections raised by the IDB, who would have raised an objection if the ditch had been an issue.
Thank you. Tony, I'm going back to the statement from the Littleport Society, and they mentioned that they're aware that the National Planning Policy Framework contains an exemption allowing for isolated homes in the countryside that are of exceptional quality or an innovative nature. They've studied the proposals, and it's their opinion that design comprehensively fails to meet this criteria. What can you say to that? I notice you've got a condition on materials used, but does that actually sort of satisfy that objection?
That's more to do with an isolated home in the countryside, where you would expect it could be that it could be designed so that it's completely energy efficient, like a passive house, or the architecture that it's using is amazing. But in these circumstances, when it's for a small scale development that really isn't isolated, I wouldn't necessarily say that would apply completely.
Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Thank you. Cambridgeshire Fire and Rescue have drawn attention to the for the need for fire hydrants. Will these be included in the application?
That would be, there is a condition for
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
condition number 7.
Going on to the question of design. I think that these are at least as good, if not better, than many of the houses being built in and around Littleport. I think the selling point here would be that it is a very small development on a large site, quite hidden away. And I think that this will be, I think these will probably be, you know, an attractive proposition for a number of buyers. So I don't find it objectionable. Thank you.
Councillor Trapp.
Thank you. I mean, it's interesting design of having so few houses in such a large space, and I think that's very commendable. My only thing is that they're all 4 beds, and they're very close to the railway station, and I'm surprised that, you know, it might be better for some affordable housing there. I know you probably discussed this with the applicant, but certainly they're a very good location for things like public transport, rather than the big estates mentioned in the Littleport Society. Or so, have you discussed any possibility of slightly smaller homes, or those back-to-backs? You know, not
No.
back-to-backs, but semi-detached. Sorry,
Um,
side to sides.
So in terms of, obviously, we're here to look at what's in front of us. The site itself as an area would not trigger affordable housing. And because there's only 6 dwellings, it also wouldn't trigger affordable housing contribution, because that would be over 10 dwellings. So on that basis, it's not being considered. But obviously, we're looking at what's in front of us, not what, obviously, having affordable housing.
Thank you.
The Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Tony. Can you just sort of confirm for me that because of that appeal, particularly the appeal decision in Soham, being outgrowth areas of Ely, Littleport, Soham, that is why this being outside the development envelope is recommended for approval? Our members know my views on our development envelopes, that we've fought long and hard to get them. But I think, so really what I'm carrying on to say was, if this was somewhere else other than Littleport, Soham or Ely, in fact, it would be contrary to policy, and therefore we'd be recommending refusal.
Obviously, each application is looked at on its own merit, but the justification for this application is because it is surrounded by residential development. Yes, it is outside the development envelope, and it has been refused previously on that basis. However, the appeal decision at Soham has meant that we look at this slightly differently, and on that basis, for this site, it does meet what the inspector said within that decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Ambrose-Smith.
Just to come back on the point about smaller houses, I haven't got any statistics or numbers to hand, but my guess is that Littleport stacks up quite as well as any other of the larger communities with regard to the number of smaller properties being built within Littleport, and also the number of social housing of various tenures available in Littleport. I think that 6 4-bedroom houses will not really cause. a great
Councillor
deal of
Ambrose-Smith, we are going to go on to debate.
Yeah, well,
These
I
are
was-
questions for, please, to the
I was
officer, but
looking
they
for
can
some
answer.
sort of support from or response from our officer.
I would agree. Yeah, obviously that in larger developments, you do get a range of development in terms of bedroom size, bedroom house, number of bedrooms, size of dwellings. Obviously, on a smaller site like this, it's not unusual for them to be all of one size. And we've seen that across the district in other places as well.
If I could just come in on that as well, Chair, I think it's just worth noting that our housing mix policy, HOU1, only relates to developments of 10 or more dwellings. So that's when our requirement to consider mix starts. So for these smaller schemes, there's no policy lever for us to get in and sort of dictate the sort of a number of bedrooms or what have you in a small development.
Okay, councillor Stubbs.
Thank you, Chair. Tony, I noticed this site has got quite a extensive history of more dwellings than what's before us today. And following on from councillor Brown's question, I think concern, I always voice this concern about anything that's outside our development line or the local plan. Should this application be approved today, what's to prevent the applicant from coming back and saying, actually, now that I see that you're in favour of developers here and the principal development's been established, what's to stop them from actually saying, actually, I've decided I want to do a bigger development?
Thank you. Obviously, we can't foresee what could come through to the future, and we would have to assess each application on its own merits. Yes, there has been previous schemes for 10 dwellings, but again, that was outside of the development envelope when we had a 5-year, had a 5-year housing land supply, and we didn't have this appeal decision. So it is slightly different in that respect. I think what would constrain it is potentially highways and obviously the biodiversity area. So it would be a concern coming forward, but obviously, and should that happen, I would need to make an assessment. And obviously, if that were the case, obviously you would have the opportunity to see the application before you.
Thank you.
Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much. It's actually very similar to Councillor Stubbs, not similar, but on the same lines. I've known 2 developments where some of the land has been retained by the owner, and then suddenly, oh look, I've got some land. Let's put some more houses on. How is this? And one of them, the condition of planning permission was that the whole land be sold with the dwelling, and it's caused enormous problems when only 1/3 of the land was sold with the dwelling. The owner retained 2/3. So, it seems on its density a right proposal, but what will happen to the land around, which is not part of the houses at the moment? Or is all the land being sold with the houses? Can we put a condition on that?
The site is one. So obviously we have got the biodiversity area, but that again, that is because the biodiversity of the site requires those areas to be retained. And that's why I mentioned you may need to consider a management condition. As far as I'm aware, there's no further land within this ownership. It wasn't shown on the application for Blue Line to say that there is that land available. So we are just looking at this piece of land.
Yes, but sorry, my question was how much of that might be retained by the owner, so that there may be possibility then of inserting more houses?
I don't think we could condition that because the permission goes with the land, not with the owner.
Right, but one could put a condition on that all that land has to be apportioned between 6 dwellings.
No, I don't think we.
It was done for this house in Swaffham Woolbeck, actually, and it wasn't carried out, and there's been enormous ructions because of that.
Just to come in on that through you, Chair, I would be reluctant to suggest to members that they consider doing that. I think the measure that, I mean, obviously the site plan shows the dwellings and their gardens. And then the remainder of the site is really that kind of landscaping and biodiversity area to the north and on the frontage. I would, from my point of view, suggest that members do consider carefully adding to the condition that's on there about biodiversity enhancements, a requirement for a management plan to come forward in perpetuity. I think that would have the effect of it would have the effect of what you're probably concerned about, and mitigating that, because it would require that that area was retained for biodiversity in the future. Any alternative scheme for more dwellings would have to come forward as part of an application, and at that stage, obviously, if there's a requirement for a particular part of the site to be retained for biodiversity, that would give us pause as to whether or not it was then appropriate to grant more dwellings on it.
Anne, please. Not that one, there.
So the red line goes, if I follow this arrow along here, and then does this along those boundaries. So the only sort of vacant land, as Dan was saying, is this habitat area. It's not like there's another parcel of land that's within the ownership of the applicant that could extend further.
And there are TPOs on some of those trees.
There's not tree preservation orders, no. They are just trees that are to be retained as part of the development.
First of all, is there some way that Councillor Trapp's concerns could be covered by condition in this? You mentioned some preservation on the
Yeah, regarding the potential for land to be, I mean, I don't think we can dictate who owns the land. If the owner
No.
chose to retain the balance of the site that you can see on there to the north and along the frontage, then I think that would be up to them. I think what we can do is require, as part of a scheme of biodiversity enhancement of that area, that the ongoing a requirement for a maintenance plan, a management and maintenance plan that would then be required to be undertaken in the future, which would have the effect of retaining that as in that use as biodiversity area. They may choose to retain that in their ownership, but then as part of that, they retain the responsibility to maintain it as well. I know you would normally expect, as part of that management and maintenance plan, to see how that was going, who was going to deliver that ongoing management and maintenance, be it a maintenance company that the owners of the dwellings pay into, or whether somebody retains it and continues to maintain it.
We'll bear that in mind when we get to get a bit further along when we're into debate, but thank you for that. And I'd just like to ask a question. Do we now have any policy when you're discussing with applicants about plastic grass?
No, Chair. Obviously, if we get an application like this and we would put a landscaping condition on, when they submit their landscaping condition as officers, we would expect to have natural grass. They wouldn't necessarily say what grasses they would use for the turf or anything, but we certainly would not accept plastic grass as you're referring to. The other issue is that we can only insist they retain it as natural grass for so long before they could actually remove it. And there's nothing in planning legislation that we could do to stop that in the future. But for the immediate term, we do have controls.
It's just that I think there's something rather horrible about putting plastic grass down and then when it wears out, chucking it in the ground. And it doesn't seem to appeal to me very much. And I wonder whether we shouldn't start moving that way, even not officially. So when you have a pre-app, it might be a question you are asking. So that's all I've got to say. So now we've got questions Any more questions? Oh, yes, councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Just coming back to this habitat area, because certainly I'm aware of other places, there's one in Burwell, for example, where that equivalent piece of land is the responsibility of the district council. I'm aware of others where the piece of land has gone into the management or by the parish council, for example. So did they have they mentioned anything about future management of that, or the potential for a council taking on the maintenance, in which case we'd need to be charging them for it?
It might just need a pause if you're willing to do that.
So in answer to your question, no, there isn't a management plan. It's more about what they have found or not found on the site and what parts of the site should remain undeveloped to ensure that the habitat and the ecology of the site is maintained.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've exhausted questions to the officers. Now we go into debate section. Members, councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, we definitely need a condition on the future management of that piece of land, that area of land, habitat area. Planning wise, Tony, thanks for the report. It was very clear, as I asked at the site visit this morning, why is it outside the development envelope anyway? But that's historic and that's where it is. On this one, because of that appeal decision in Soham and because this is in Littleport, I think we have to accept that although it's outside the development envelope, we should approve this. I say that reluctantly because you know what I think about maintaining our development envelopes. So if you wish, Chairman, I'll propose we accept the officer's recommendation.
So just make it quite clear. So you're suggesting that your proposal is that we support the officer's recommendation, but you have a condition on the maintenance, which have already been officer suggested, and councillor Trapp, is that a seconding? I beg your pardon, Christine Ambrose-Smith, councillor Ambrose-Smith.
Thank you. I'm happy that my two colleagues have put this point about the ecology bit around there. As a member of the parish council, obviously I can't speak for the parish council, but I don't think the parish council would want to be awarded this to look after. I think that this is down to a management company. Littleport is a large parish, and we've got considerable amounts of land that we look after. So I think it would be most unfair if it was awarded to the parish council. That's just my view.
Can we just a minute? I'm going to have a quick discussion with my vice chairman. Yes, I think we hadn't heard the officer details of the condition, which we should do. Yes, councillor Brown.
Right, Chairman, can I make myself clear? When I said that we need a further condition to be agreed in writing with the local planning authority as to the future management of the habitat area in perpetuity.
If it helps.
I don't care who it is, I want that in writing from them as to how it's going to happen. Now, if they want to go into negotiations with Littleport Parish Council for Littleport Parish Council to say no, that's up to them. Condition I'm asking for is that we know before building starts what is happening with that land into the future.
Okay.
If it helps.
We'll do to one thing at a time. Thank you, councillor Brown.
Yeah.
Tracy.
Yeah, if it
what's
helps,
your-
I have, and Dan can tell me if I've got this down wrong. I've got delegated authority to the case officer to include an additional condition for management and maintenance plan for the biodiversity habitat.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair, I just wanted, before members voted on anything, to be clear about exactly what we're asking members to vote on. There is that condition, which I think we're now clear on. There is also the condition that Tony mentioned in her housekeeping at the beginning, which is the requirement for an energy and sustainability strategy, which deals with renewable energy, which we seek on any scheme over five dwellings. And there was just the matter of taking the phased development out of the description. So that was in the original description. It may still be on, I think it is on the agenda. So I just want members to be absolutely clear that we're taking that out, because that isn't something that's been requested or evidenced by the applicant, just so members are absolutely sure.
Councillor Brown.
Particularly on the phased, I'm very happy with that, because I know what will happen. Otherwise, they'll come in and try and negotiate on their SIL contributions, saying, oh, well, it's phased, so we only need to pay a sixth, because I'm seeing that quite often now. So yes,
we've
let's
got-
take the phasing out.
So we've got to the stage now that you're proposing we accept the officer's recommendation, however, under certain conditions. The conditions have been read out and agreed and understood by Tracy, and the seconder also is in agreement with that. I think we've got there. Has anybody got a reason to say we haven't got there? Okay, so we're now going to put this, I think, to a vote. Are those in favour of, I think Tracy better just read out what they're going to be in favour of.
Okay, so you're recommending approval, and let me just go back to the first bit. Oh, sorry, recommending approval with the inclusion of conditions 15, the omitted conditions 15 to 18, the additional energy and I can't even say that, sustainability condition at 19, removal of reference to phase development, and delegated authority to include a condition for management and maintenance plan for the biodiversity habitat. That's a mouthful.
I congratulate you. I think we've got this. So are those in favour of that proposal? Raise their hands. That looks to me like unanimous. And I won't ask anybody who's an objection to, they're not. As far as I am aware, that is it. And there was a reminder about the meeting in Burwell, which I read out at the start of the meeting. So members, thank you very much for attending, and have a safe journey home.